First, maybe a few words about what we do, what we are. So I'm a manufacturing person. I run a small factory of about 500 people. We have one foot solidly in the aerospace industry. We primarily do a jet engine, those kind that you find on the Boeing 777, on the large Airbus 380, if you fly over the Atlantic every now and then. We take this engine, we convert it into an industrial application for power generation. So I have one foot in aerospace, one foot into the energy sector. So everything in terms of what I do is aerospace, except my end user is not in the aviation industry. My end user is in the energy space. Why are those engines important? The markets we serve are worldwide. We export 100% typically of our production worldwide. These products are in demand, particularly as the world embraces more and more renewable energy around the planet, which is a good thing. As you do that, the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, and therefore when the wind dies, you need a backup power solution. Aircraft engine can start very fast. You felt it when you're on the runway, and that's an attribute which is useful to us. They're very easy to transport. They're meant to be lightweight, otherwise the aircraft wouldn't fly. And therefore, in remote areas of the world where they need power and power shortages are an issue, you can easily transport them. We're part of Siemens for about 2 years. About 2 years ago, before that, we were part of Rolls-Royce, which is a predominantly an aerospace company, long established, flagship British company, moved country. Now we work for a flagship German company. It's making it very interesting, as you can imagine, with such a significant acquisition. We spent the first year worrying about, IT and finance and pensions and HR things. But in the last year or so, we've now begun to put our roadmap to significantly contribute to Siemens, to the energy sector, but using aerospace technology. We will transform our business, which is a small business, about 500 people, over the next 4 to 5 years. Siemens has committed, and it's been publicly announced in Davos last January, $22 million to do this transformation. So it's not a large amount by multinationals standard, but I have an interesting, a bit like some of the previous speakers, on having an interesting context in Montreal. The context that I live in is I run a small business, 500 employees, so I can know everybody on a by-name basis, but with the means of a large multinational, like Siemens, before that Rolls-Royce. So it makes it interesting. What is Industry 4.0 or digitalization for a company like ours? It's a number of things, but there's 2 or 3 perhaps takeaways. One of them is, even though we're small, we cover the entire value chain, end to end. So both from the innovation, I have engineers working, and the product that we will bring to the market in 5 years' time, running on pure renewable liquid hydrogen, new technologies, new innovations, etc. We do the product development. We have to sell it to users and customers around the world. We have an operations factory. We manage about a network of 500 suppliers distributed worldwide. So that brings interesting logistics, integration issues. And our final assembly is in Montreal, including our test center. The engine leaves the factory in Montreal, and typically we're a very long cycle industry. Those engines will be in operations for typically about 30, 40 years. So I'm still responsible today to monitor the service performance of an engine called the Olympus, which was the aircraft engine used on Concorde. So there's 150 of those engines still operating as backup power solution for nuclear power plants around the world. Every now and then, we get to see the data. It's a bit old, wasn't exactly digital in that time. But that gives you the spectrum that we go from things that will exist in 5, 10 years' time, as well as things that were put in service 20 years, 30 years ago. And that makes it a small microcosm, which is very interesting from an overall Siemens perspective, because we can cover the entire value chain. And then borrow from the multiple divisions of Siemens. Siemens has a division called the Digital Factory, which integrates a lot of these technologies and techniques and know-how and backbones that we can borrow. But nonetheless, we do that with the mindset of a small business owner. So a lot of my time on preparing this transformation with my team is asking them, where is the customer at 4.0? And Manfred had a slide about the 3 aspects, which to me covers, and I tell most of my team and my stakeholders that I have only 3 kinds of customers. Now, upstream, my customer has the personality of an equipment buyer. He needs to make a buying decision. So things like virtual prototyping, virtual product development is key to him. We can take a digital version of our engine, we can integrate that with his own application, whether it's a power plant, whether it's the grid in Ireland, or a remote mining operation in desert Australia. But we have to integrate our solution with him and do what-if scenarios. And the virtual prototyping and virtual solution, digital solution, is where the game starts. So digitization, or 4.0 in that case, for that customer who is a buyer, is about making our selling easier, making our value proposition to the customer easier, being able to understand the customer operations better and integrate digitally with them to make him see the future. Eventually, we win an order. When the order comes, it typically, traditionally in our industry, it's a 12, 18 months cycle time from contract award to the engine being installed at the customer site. That's the old world. The world is now asking for 3 or 4 months, and that's driven by a number of factors around the world. So we are going to use digitization and 4.0 in that case to really drastically shorten our lead times, our cycle times. Some of it will be by bringing novel robotics and advanced manufacturing like 3D printing. Some of it will be by connecting our suppliers digitally with our digital models back and forth and getting all the knowledge from the component being produced back into our factory, back into the engine. So when my customer, from between contract award and installation, the personality of my customer, he's a project manager. He wants adherence to schedule. He wants to understand that everything is to spec, and he's cracking the whip, and he wants his engines delivered. And the way you satisfy that customer is very different than the way you satisfy a buyer. And we need to take that into account as we do our transformation. Eventually, after a bit of scar tissue and tough sessions, eventually the engine gets delivered, leaves the factory, leaves Montreal, and gets installed in service. At that point, the personality of the customer completely changes, and a new personality comes up. The customer becomes an operator. So he's now managing an asset. He's trying to make revenue, he's trying to make money. So to him, quality is not about whether we're competitive as a product. Quality is not about adherence to schedule. To him, quality is reliability, predicting downtime. Can we manage his maintenance better? And that's where the big data for us comes. The engine spits out 500 to 1,000 sensors, depending on the engines we've got and the power plant and the application. Some of this data is scanned very slow. Some of it is scanned and updated 100 times per second. Some of the data is critical to the safety of the customer and the equipment. Some of it is long-term and more like a logbook type information. And we have to make sense of all of that. There's a lot of value in this, hidden value, and our role there is to bring that value to the surface with the customer. So it's a snapshot, but it gives you these personalities, and everything we do on transforming a small business, but with the means of a large corporation, is done with thinking about the customer and choosing, because you've seen some of these lists. They can be quite impressive and can be a bit, can give you a bit of a vertigo and where do you start? But you have to keep it focused on transforming your business to create customer value, and in the long run, that will create business value. The other important thought in all this and why we're motivated to do that is there's a word that, as Gilles said, you need to repeat a few things to see a pattern, but there's one word that I haven't yet seen, so I'll quote it, so that'll be my contribution. In doing this, there is something about what I would call a 4.0 or digitization culture. It's changing the culture of the workplace and the employees, and that's a challenge and an opportunity for the employees. And ever since we've announced our intentions to modernize and digitize our factory, The response has been hugely positive, from the shop floor to the most advanced PhD R&D engineers that we have. But it's also causing a challenge on management. So you have to take that into account, and it's also part of the fabric. So it's a brief introduction. I think it touches on a lot of the themes that my co-panelists presented, but that's basically who we are, what we do, and where we are trying to go. Merci.